Tonight, a single father races against time to save his 2-year-old daughter who is having respiratory arrest due to asthma. But when he's stopped in the middle of a storm, it's not a police officer. It's Adriana Hale, the most powerful billionaire in the city. Her decision that night will change everything. A fateful encounter, a dark secret, and the brutal truth that sometimes the person who saves you is the very person who destroyed you first. Follow the story to the end. Like and comment with the city you're watching to let me know how far this story has progressed. The rain hit the windshield like gravel, each drop exploding against the glass in a relentless assault that made the road ahead almost invisible. Caleb Vance hunched forward over the steering wheel, squinting through the storm, his knuckles bone white as he gripped the cracked leather. The wipers beat frantically but uselessly across the windshield, smearing the water rather than clearing it. Behind him, in the car seat he'd installed 3 times before getting it right, his daughter Emma wheezed. Not the normal wheeze, not the one that meant she needed her inhaler and a calm voice. This was the wheeze that meant her airways were closing, that her little body was fighting for oxygen it couldn't get, that every second he wasted was a second closer to. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The ancient Honda Civic shuddered in protest, the engine rattling like it might fall apart, but the speedometer needle crept upward. 60. 70. "It's okay, baby, he said, his voice tight. "We're almost there, just breathe for me, nice and slow." But Emma couldn't breathe slow. Each inhale was a desperate, high-pitched whistle. Each exhale barely existed. Caleb's phone sat in the cup holder, the GPS glowing with the route to Mercy General. 12 more minutes. 12 minutes might as well be 12 hours when your 2-year-old daughter sounded like she was drowning in air. He blew through a yellow light just as it turned red. The hospital had the emergency inhaler, the nebulizer, the doctors who could actually do something other than watch helplessly while his daughter's lips started turning. Don't think it. Don't even think it. The rain intensified, if that was even possible. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough that Emma would have cried if she'd had the breath for it. Caleb took a corner too fast, felt the tires slip on the wet asphalt, corrected hard. His heart hammered against his ribs. 7 years ago, he'd been someone different, someone with a future that looked nothing like this. But then the factory accident happened, and Sarah left, and suddenly he was a 25-year-old single father working 3 jobs to keep the lights on, and nothing in his life had gone right since. Except Emma. Emma was the only thing that mattered. Emma was the only thing keeping him from just lying down in the middle of the road and letting the rain wash him away. "Daddy's got you," he said. His voice cracked. "I got you, Em." Another wheeze from the back seat, weaker this time. He pressed the accelerator to the floor. That was when he saw the lights. Not street lights, not headlights, blue lights, red lights, flashing in his rearview mirror with the kind of authority that made his stomach drop straight through the floor of the car. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no." But the lights stayed there, insistent, and Caleb knew how this worked. You don't run from the cops. Not when you're driving a car held together with duct tape and prayer. Not when you've got a kid in the back seat. Not when you're poor and nobody gives you the benefit of the doubt. He eased off the gas, guided the car toward the shoulder. Every second he slowed down was a second Emma didn't have. But what choice did he have? If he kept going, they'd call it a chase. They'd use spike strips. They'd escalate. And Emma would die in the back seat while he explained himself through a shattered window with guns pointed at his face. The Civic rolled to a stop on the side of the road. Rain hammered the roof. Emma's breathing was a thin, reedy sound that was barely audible over the storm. Caleb twisted in his seat. "Emma, sweetie, I need you to hang on, just a little longer. Can you do that for Daddy?" Her eyes were half closed. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. She didn't respond. Panic clawed at his throat. He reached back, touched her leg. Her skin was clammy. The blue and red lights painted the inside of the car in alternating colors. But they weren't coming from a police cruiser. Caleb's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. The vehicle behind him wasn't a patrol car. It was a black Mercedes S-Class, sleek and expensive, the kind of car that cost more than Caleb would earn in 5 years. The emergency lights weren't mounted on the roof. They were somewhere inside, behind the windshield, small and discreet. What the hell? The driver's door of the Mercedes opened. A woman stepped out. Even through the rain and the darkness, Caleb could tell she didn't belong here. She wore a charcoal gray suit tailored so precisely it might have been painted on, and despite the downpour, she moved with the kind of unhurried confidence that suggested the rain wouldn't dare touch her without permission. Dark hair pulled back, expression unreadable. She approached his window. Caleb lowered it halfway. Rain immediately spattered his arm, cold and sharp. "Do you have any idea how fast you were?" "My daughter is dying." Caleb didn't shout it. He said it flatly, the way you state a fact that's so terrible it doesn't need emphasis. "I need to get to the hospital, right now." The woman stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes, sharp, assessing, shifted from Caleb to the back seat. Emma wheezed. The sound cut through the rain like a blade. For a moment, the woman didn't move. Then she stepped closer, leaning down to get a better look through the window. Her expression didn't soften exactly, but something changed in it, something Caleb couldn't name. "How far to the hospital?" she asked. "Mercy General, 10 minutes. "You won't make it in 10 minutes. She said it with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what 10 minutes in this traffic, in this storm, actually meant. "Not in this car. Then I'll make it in 8. Caleb's hand moved toward the gear shift. "I'm leaving. You can write me a ticket or arrest me or whatever the hell you want, but I'm going. I'm not a cop." That stopped him. "What?" "I'm not a police officer." The woman straightened, glanced back at the Mercedes, then returned her attention to Caleb. Her voice was clipped, decisive. "Get out of the car." "I told you, I don't have—" "Get out of the car and get in mine. Now." Caleb stared at her like she'd just suggested they go for a leisurely drive through the countryside. "You're insane." "Probably." She was already moving toward the back door of the Civic. "But my car is faster, and I know a route that'll get us there in 6 minutes. Unlock the door." "Who the hell are you?" She paused, rain streaming down her face, and for the first time Caleb saw something almost human flicker across her features. Impatience, maybe. Or urgency. "Someone who doesn't have time to argue," she said. "Unlock the door or watch your daughter suffocate. Your choice." It wasn't a choice. Caleb hit the unlock button. The woman yanked open the back door and immediately began working on Emma's car seat, her fingers moving with surprising efficiency despite the rain and the darkness. She didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. Within 30 seconds, she had the entire seat unlatched. "Can you carry her?" she asked. Caleb was already out of the car, stumbling through the rain to the back door. He pulled Emma, car seat and all, into his arms. She was so light, too light. Her head lolled against his shoulder. "Move," the woman said. She led him to the Mercedes, opened the back door, and gestured sharply. Caleb climbed in, awkward and dripping, and fumbled with the seatbelt until the car seat clicked into place. Emma's breathing was so faint now he had to lean close to hear it. The woman slid into the driver's seat. The door closed with a heavy, expensive thunk. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly floral. Everything was sleek, dark, untouched by the chaos outside. She didn't look back, didn't ask if he was ready. The Mercedes surged forward. Caleb had never been in a car that moved like this. The acceleration was immediate, smooth, powerful. The engine didn't rattle or protest, it purred. Within seconds they were doing 80, then 90. The woman drove like she'd memorized every inch of the city, cutting through streets Caleb didn't recognize, taking turns at speeds that should have sent them into a skid, but somehow didn't. The rain lashed the windshield, but the wipers kept it clear. The headlights cut through the storm like searchlights. Caleb kept his hand on Emma's leg, his eyes on her chest. Each tiny rise and fall felt like a gift. A fragile, temporary gift. "What's her name?" the woman asked. Her voice was calm, controlled, her eyes never leaving the road. "Emma." "How old?" 2. "Asthma?" "Yeah." Caleb swallowed hard. "She had an attack last month. We got it under control, but tonight it came out of nowhere. She couldn't breathe, and I didn't have the emergency inhaler. I left it at work. It doesn't matter." The woman took a corner hard enough that Caleb had to brace himself against the door. "You're getting her to the hospital. That's what matters." Caleb stared at the back of her head. "Why are you doing this?" "Because she's 2 years old and she can't breathe." It wasn't an answer. Or maybe it was the only answer. They blew through a red light, A horn blared somewhere behind them, Dopplering away into the rain. The woman didn't flinch. "Who are you?" Caleb asked again. This time, she didn't respond. The city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. Caleb had lived here his whole life, but he barely recognized the route they were taking. Narrow streets, shortcuts through neighborhoods he'd never heard of. The kind of knowledge you only had if you owned the city, instead of just surviving in it. Emma made a small, choked sound. Caleb's heart stopped. Emma, baby, stay with me." He touched her face. Her skin was cold. Her eyes were closed. "How much longer?" His voice came out strangled. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. A lifetime. The woman pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 100. Caleb didn't pray. He'd stopped praying after the accident, after Sarah left, after every single thing in his life that could go wrong did go wrong. But he found himself whispering it anyway, the same 4 words over and over. Please, 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 please. The rain didn't care. The storm didn't ease. Time didn't slow down. But the Mercedes flew through the city like a bullet, and the woman behind the wheel drove with the kind of focus that made Caleb think, just for a second, that maybe they were going to make it. 2 minutes. Emma's breathing stopped. "No." Caleb's hands were shaking. "No, Emma. No." "Is she breathing?" The woman's voice cut through his panic, sharp as glass. I don't... Check. Caleb pressed his fingers to Emma's neck. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely feel anything. There. A pulse. Faint. Thready. But there. "She has a pulse," he gasped. "She's not breathing, but she has a pulse." 1 minute. The woman took a turn so hard the tires screamed. Caleb caught a glimpse of a sign. Mercy General Emergency Entrance, 0.5 miles. The Mercedes didn't slow down. Caleb tilted Emma's head back, the way the paramedics had shown him last time. Cleared her airway, listened. A breath. Shallow. Barely there. Another one. "She's breathing," he choked out. "She's breathing." The Mercedes roared into the hospital's emergency bay, scattering a group of nurses who'd been standing near the entrance. The woman slammed the car into park before it had fully stopped and was out of the driver's seat in one fluid motion. She yanked open Caleb's door. "Out! Now!" Caleb stumbled onto the wet pavement, Emma's car seat clutched to his chest. The automatic doors slid open. Fluorescent light spilled out, harsh and bright after the darkness of the storm. A nurse rushed toward them. "What happened?" "Asthma attack," the woman said before Caleb could speak. 2-year-old female. Breathing is shallow and irregular. Pulse is weak. She needs a nebulizer and oxygen. Now." The nurse didn't ask questions. She grabbed a gurney, and Caleb laid Emma down, his hands shaking so badly he could barely undo the straps. Another nurse appeared, then a doctor, and suddenly Emma was surrounded by people in scrubs, all moving with practiced efficiency. They wheeled her through a set of double doors. Caleb tried to follow. A hand caught his arm, firm, unyielding. "They need space to work," the woman said. "That's my daughter. And they're saving her life. Let them." Caleb wanted to shove past her, to run through those doors and not let Emma out of his sight, but his legs suddenly didn't work. The adrenaline drained out of him all at once, leaving him hollow and shaking. He collapsed into a chair in the waiting room. The woman stood a few feet away, her suit soaked through, her hair plastered to her skull. She looked like she'd been dragged through the storm, but her posture was perfect. Her expression was unreadable. Caleb stared at her. "You just saved my daughter's life." "Maybe." She pulled out her phone, swiped through something. "The doctors are doing the actual saving." "Who are you?" She glanced up. For the first time, Caleb got a good look at her face. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing. Maybe 40, though it was hard to tell. Beautiful in the way that expensive things were beautiful. Precise, deliberate, untouchable. "Adriana Hale," she said. The name hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. Adriana Hale. Everyone in the city knew that name. She was the CEO of Heir Industries, the reclusive billionaire who ran one of the largest conglomerates on the East Coast. Real estate, tech, manufacturing, energy. If it made money, Heir Industries had a stake in it. She was also famous for never giving interviews, never attending charity galas, never doing anything that put her in the public eye. The business press called her the Ghost because she ran her empire from the shadows. and she was standing in a hospital waiting room, soaked to the bone, because she'd just driven Caleb's dying daughter through a thunderstorm at 100 miles an hour. You're... Caleb couldn't finish the sentence. Yes. Adriana pocketed her phone. And you're Caleb Vance. You work at Davidson Logistics, night shift supervisor. You've been there for 3 years. Caleb's blood went cold. How do you know that? I pulled your license plate while I was following you. She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Ran a background check while I was driving. While you were... I have an assistant who handles that sort of thing. Adriana glanced toward the double doors where they'd taken Emma. Your daughter will be fine. Mercy General has an excellent pediatric respiratory unit. Caleb didn't know what to say. His brain felt like it had been put through a blender. Why were you following me? I wasn't following you specifically. I was on my way home. Adriana's expression didn't change. You cut me off at the intersection near Grant and 5th. Then you ran a red light. Then another one. I assumed you were either drunk or reckless, so I followed to get your plate number. You have emergency lights in your car. I have a lot of things in my car. That's not an answer. Adriana's gaze flicked to him, cool and assessing. No, she agreed. It's not. Before Caleb could press her, a doctor emerged from the double doors. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of calm demeanor that came from decades of practice. Caleb shot to his feet. Emma, she's stable, the doctor said immediately. We got her on oxygen and a nebulizer. Her breathing has improved significantly. She's not out of the woods yet, but the worst has passed. The relief was so intense Caleb thought he might pass out. He braced himself against the chair. Can I see her? In a few minutes. We're still monitoring her vitals and running some tests. The doctor's expression softened. You got her here just in time, Mr. Vance. Another few minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation. Caleb looked at Adriana. She was already walking toward the exit. Wait, he called. She paused, but didn't turn around. Thank you, Caleb said. His voice was rough. I don't know what else to say. Just, thank you. Adriana glanced back over her shoulder. Her face was unreadable. Take care of your daughter, Mr. Vance. Then she was gone. But the hospital kept Emma overnight for observation. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, listening to the beep of the heart monitor, waiting for the moment when something would go wrong again. It didn't. By morning, Emma was breathing normally. The color had returned to her face. She even smiled when Caleb gave her the stuffed rabbit he'd grabbed from the car before the nurses parked it in the lot. Daddy, she said, her voice hoarse but strong. Bunny. Caleb's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead. Yeah, baby. Bunny. The doctor came by around 8. She's doing great, he said. I want to keep her until this afternoon just to be safe, but barring any complications, you should be able to take her home. Home. The apartment with the leaky faucet and the heat that only worked half the time. The place Caleb could barely afford even with 3 jobs. But Emma would be there, alive, breathing. That was all that mattered. Thank you, Caleb said. The doctor nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, The bill's been taken care of, by the way. Caleb blinked. What? Your bill. It's been paid in full. The doctor checked his tablet. Emergency room visit, nebulizer treatment, oxygen therapy, overnight observation, everything. Somebody called this morning and settled it. Caleb's stomach dropped. Who? The doctor shrugged. Didn't give a name, just said they were handling it. But Caleb knew. He spent the rest of the morning trying to track down Adriana Hale. He called Hale Industries and got stonewalled by 3 different assistants. He tried searching for her personal contact information and found nothing. The woman was a ghost. By the time the hospital discharged Emma that afternoon, Caleb had given up. He carried her to the parking lot, where his battered Civic sat in the same spot he'd abandoned it the night before. The rain had stopped. The sky was gray and heavy, but the storm had passed. Caleb buckled Emma into her car seat. She babbled happily, pointing at a bird on the sidewalk. He slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, staring at the hospital entrance. A woman he didn't know had saved his daughter's life. Had driven like a maniac through a thunderstorm, had paid a medical bill that would have bankrupted him. And then she'd disappeared. Why? Caleb muttered. Emma giggled in the back seat. Caleb turned the key. The Civic's engine coughed, sputtered, and finally turned over. He pulled out of the parking lot and headed home, the question still rattling around in his head. Why? 3 days later, Caleb got his answer. He was at work. Davidson Logistics, a warehouse on the south side of the city where he spent 10 hours a night managing inventory and yelling at forklifts to stay in their lanes when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he thought of Emma, thought of emergencies, and picked up. Mr. Vance? The voice was clipped, professional, female, not Adriana. Yeah? My name is Rebecca Chu. I'm calling on behalf of Adriana Hale. Caleb nearly dropped the phone. How did you get this number? Ms. Hale would like to meet with you. Why? She didn't say. She asked me to arrange a meeting at your earliest convenience. Caleb's mind raced. Tell her thanks, but no thanks. I'm not interested. There was a pause. Mr. Vance, Ms. Hale was very insistent. I don't care. I appreciate what she did, but I don't owe her anything. She's not asking you to owe her anything. Rebecca's tone was patient, like she was used to dealing with difficult people. She simply wants to talk. About what? I wasn't given those details. Caleb pinched the bridge of his nose. A forklift beeped nearby, backing up with a pallet of boxes. Look, I've got a kid to take care of and bills to pay. I don't have time for... Ms. Hale is willing to compensate you for your time. I don't want her money. Then consider it a favor. Rebecca's voice softened just slightly. She did save your daughter's life, Mr. Vance. That stopped him cold. Caleb hated being in debt, hated owing people. But Rebecca was right. Adriana Hale had saved Emma, and now she wanted to talk. Fine, he muttered. When? Tomorrow, 6 p.m. I'll text you the address. The line went dead. Caleb stared at his phone, a knot forming in his stomach. What the hell did a billionaire CEO want with him? The address Rebecca texted him wasn't a corporate office or a penthouse suite. It was a cafe, not even a fancy one. Just a small, quiet place on the east side called Crescent Moon. The kind of spot with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, and a chalkboard menu that listed things like oat milk latte and lavender honey scone. Caleb arrived 10 minutes early because he was always early and scanned the room. Adriana sat in the corner. She looked different from the night of the storm. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a simple black sweater. No suit, no armor. She looked almost normal. Caleb crossed the room and stopped at her table. You paid my hospital bill. Adriana glanced up. Hello to you too, Mr. Vance. Don't do that. Caleb sat down without being invited. Don't pretend this is a social call. You paid my bill. Why? Because you couldn't afford it. The bluntness of it hit him like a slap. You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think. Adriana set down her coffee cup. You work 3 jobs. You're raising a 2-year-old daughter alone. You're barely scraping by. The hospital bill would have destroyed you. Caleb's jaw tightened. So you what? Felt sorry for me? No. Adriana's gaze was steady, unflinching. I felt responsible. For what? You didn't cause Emma's asthma attack. No, but I could help. So I did. Caleb leaned back in his chair, studying her. She didn't look like someone who'd just dropped tens of thousands of dollars on a stranger's medical bills. She looked calm, composed, like it was nothing, and maybe to her, it was nothing. I don't want your charity, Caleb said. It's not charity, it's a payment. For what? Adriana's expression shifted, just slightly. Something flickered in her eyes, something that almost looked like uncertainty. For reminding me, she said quietly, that not everything is a transaction. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Adriana picked up her coffee again. How is Emma? She's fine, breathing normally, no complications. Good. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Caleb felt out of place in his work boots and faded jacket, sitting across from a woman who probably owned half the city. Why did you want to meet? He asked finally. Adriana hesitated. It was the first time Caleb had seen her hesitate about anything. I wanted to make sure she was all right, Adriana said, and I wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Caleb's temper flared. What do you want me to say? That I'm grateful? I am. That I owe you? I do. But I don't need you checking up on me like I'm some charity case. You're not a charity case. Adriana's voice was quiet but firm. You're a father who would have done anything to save his daughter. I respect that. The fight drained out of Caleb as quickly as it had come. He rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. I don't understand you. Most people don't. You're a billionaire. You run one of the biggest companies in the country. Why do you care about some random guy and his kid? Adriana was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Caleb had ever heard it. Because I know what it's like, she said, to feel powerless. Caleb stared at her. Adriana stood abruptly, pulling her coat from the back of the chair. Take care of yourself, Mr. Vance, and take care of Emma. She turned to leave. Wait, Caleb said. She paused. Thank you, he said. For everything, I mean it. Adriana looked back at him. For just a second, her mask slipped, and Caleb saw something raw beneath it. Something lonely. Then it was gone. You're welcome, she said, and she walked out of the cafe, leaving Caleb sitting alone at the table, more confused than ever. Caleb told himself that was the end of it. He went back to work. Back to his 3 jobs, his cramped apartment, his life of barely getting by. Emma recovered fully, her asthma under control with the new medication the hospital had prescribed. Everything went back to normal. Except it didn't. Because 2 weeks later, Caleb came home to find an envelope taped to his door. Inside was a check, $20,000, and a note written in precise, elegant handwriting for Emma's future. No strings attached. A.H. Caleb stared at the check until the numbers blurred. Then he crumpled the note in his fist and made a decision. He was going to find Adriana Hale, and he was going to give her money back. Getting past the front desk at Hale Industries turned out to be harder than getting Emma to eat vegetables. Caleb stood in the lobby of the tallest building in the downtown financial district, clutching the envelope with the check inside, and stared at the receptionist behind the massive marble desk. She looked like she'd been carved from the same expensive stone, polished, immovable, and completely unimpressed by his presence. I need to see Adriana Hale, Caleb said for the 3rd time. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, her smile never wavering. No, but then I'm afraid that won't be possible. She gestured toward the exit with one perfectly manicured hand. If you'd like to schedule a meeting, you can submit a request through our website. Response time is typically 6 to 8 weeks. I don't have 6 to 8 weeks. I need to see her today. The receptionist's smile tightened. Sir, Ms. Hale doesn't take walk-in appointments. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Caleb glanced toward the elevators. 2 security guards stood nearby, watching him with the kind of attention that suggested they'd already been alerted. Both were built like refrigerators. He tried a different approach. Can you at least tell her Caleb Vance is here? She'll know who I am. I'm sure she will. The receptionist's tone suggested she thought no such thing. But unless you have an appointment, fine. Caleb pulled out the check and slapped it on the desk. Give her this. Tell her I don't want her money. The receptionist looked at the check like it might explode. She didn't touch it. Sir, I can't accept. It's not for you. It's for her. Caleb's frustration was bubbling over. Can you please just tell her I was here? Tell her I tried to return it? The receptionist's expression softened, just barely. I'll make a note of it. It was the best he was going to get. Caleb snatched the check back, shoved it in his pocket, and walked out of the building feeling like he'd just lost a fight he hadn't known he was in. He tried twice more over the next week. Same result. The receptionist got better at recognizing him. The security guard started moving toward him the moment he walked through the door. On his 4th attempt, one of the guards, a guy with a shaved head and a name tag that read Marcus, actually pulled him aside. Look, man, Marcus said quietly. I don't know what you did to piss off the boss, but she's made it real clear you're not getting past this lobby. Save yourself the trouble and go home. I'm not trying to piss her off, Caleb said. I'm trying to give her something back. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Must be something pretty important. It is. Important enough to get yourself arrested for trespassing? Caleb deflated. No. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Then go home, brother. Whatever this is, it's not worth it. Caleb left. But he didn't go home. He went to the cafe where he'd met Adriana. Crescent Moon. Maybe she came here regularly. Maybe he'd get lucky. He didn't. He sat there for 3 hours nursing a single cup of coffee that cost more than his lunch, and Adriana never showed. The barista, a college kid with purple hair and a nose ring, eventually came over. You waiting for someone? Yeah. They stand you up? Something like that. The barista shrugged sympathetically. That sucks, man. Next coffee's on the house. Caleb almost laughed. Free coffee wasn't going to solve his problem. But he took it anyway. By the end of the second week, Caleb was ready to give up. Maybe he'd just deposit the check. Use it for Emma. That's what Adriana wanted, right? For Emma to have a better future? But every time he looked at the check, something stopped him. It felt wrong. Like accepting it would mean something he wasn't ready to agree to. Like it would tie him to Adriana Hale in a way he couldn't untangle. He didn't want to owe her. He didn't want to owe anyone. That's when Rebecca Chu called again. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice as crisp as ever. Ms. Hale would like to meet with you. Caleb was at the warehouse, halfway through his shift. He stepped outside into the cold night air. Tell her I've been trying to meet with her for 2 weeks. Your people keep throwing me out. Yes, I'm aware Ms. Hale found it amusing. Amusing. Her word, not mine. Rebecca paused. She's willing to see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll text you the address. Is it going to be another public place? Because I'm done with cafes. It's her private office. That surprised him. She's letting me into her office. Apparently you've been persistent enough to earn it. Rebecca's tone was dry. Don't make her regret it, Mr. Vance. The line went dead. Caleb stared at his phone, then shoved it back in his pocket and returned to the warehouse. He didn't sleep that night. The address Rebecca sent him wasn't the Hale Industries building downtown. It was a converted brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood on the north side. No corporate logo, no massive lobby, just a discreet bronze plaque beside the door that read, Private. Caleb climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened immediately. Rebecca Chu stood on the other side. She was younger than Caleb had expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features and an expression that suggested she'd already categorized him, assessed his threat level, and decided he wasn't worth worrying about. Mr. Vance? She said. Right on time. I'm usually early, Caleb said. Ms. Hale appreciates punctuality. Rebecca stepped aside. This way. The interior of the brownstone was nothing like the sterile corporate glamour of Hale Industries. It was warm, lived in. Bookshelves lined the walls, packed with volumes that looked like they'd actually been read. A Persian rug covered the hardwood floor. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Rebecca led him down a hallway and stopped at a closed door. She knocked once. Come in, Adriana's voice called from inside. Rebecca opened the door and gestured for Caleb to enter. Then she closed it behind him, leaving him alone. Adriana sat behind a desk near the window. She was dressed casually again, dark slacks, a cream-colored blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose knot. She looked up from whatever she'd been reading and set it aside. Mr. Vance? She said. You've been making a nuisance of yourself. Caleb pulled the envelope from his jacket and dropped it on her desk. I'm returning this. Adriana didn't look at it. Why? Because I don't want it. It's not for you. It's for Emma. Emma doesn't need $20,000 from a stranger. Everyone needs $20,000, Mr. Vance. Don't be ridiculous. Adriana leaned back in her chair. That money could pay for her education, her medical expenses, a better apartment, a car that doesn't sound like it's going to explode every time you start it. How do you know what my car sounds like? I was behind you, remember? A faint smile touched her lips. I'm surprised it made it to the hospital. Caleb's jaw tightened. I don't need your charity. It's not charity. I already told you that. Then what is it? Adriana was quiet for a moment. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. When I was 12, she said, my mother got sick. Cancer. We didn't have insurance. My father worked 3 jobs just like you, but it wasn't enough. We lost everything trying to keep her alive. Caleb didn't say anything. She died anyway, Adriana continued. Her voice was calm, detached, like she was talking about someone else's life. And my father spent the next 10 years drowning in debt. He never recovered. Not financially, not emotionally. She turned to face Caleb. I built Heir Industries from nothing because I swore I would never be powerless like that again. I would never watch someone I love suffer because I didn't have the resources to help them. Caleb swallowed hard. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Adriana crossed her arms. The point is, I have resources now, more than I could ever use. And when I see someone in the same position my father was in, I help. Not because I pity them, because I can. I'm not your father, Caleb said quietly. No, you're not. Adriana's gaze was steady. But Emma is still a child who deserves a chance, and you're still a man who shouldn't have to choose between paying rent and buying her medication. Caleb looked down at the envelope on the desk. If I take this, what do you want in return? Nothing. Nobody gives away $20,000 for nothing. I do. Adriana walked back to her desk and sat down. But if it makes you feel better, consider it a loan. Pay me back when Emma graduates college, with interest, if you insist. Caleb let out a short, bitter laugh. You think I'm going to be able to pay you back in 16 years? I think you're going to do whatever it takes to give your daughter a good life. And if that means accepting help when it's offered, then you should be smart enough to take it. They stared at each other across the desk. Caleb hated this. Hated feeling like he was backed into a corner. Hated that she was right. Why do you care? He asked. Really? You didn't know me before that night. You didn't know Emma. Why does this matter to you? Adriana's expression softened just slightly. Because that night in the storm, you didn't think about yourself. You didn't think about the consequences. You just thought about saving your daughter, and She paused. I haven't met many people like that. Like what? People who put someone else first, without hesitation, without calculation. Caleb frowned. You did the same thing. You drove us to the hospital. That's different. How? Because I had nothing to lose. Adriana's voice was quiet. You had everything to lose, and you risked it anyway. The weight of her words settled between them. Caleb picked up the envelope. He didn't open it, just held it. I'll take it, he said. For Emma, but I'm paying you back. Fine. With interest. If you insist. Caleb tucked the envelope into his jacket. Thank you. Adriana nodded. You're welcome. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Can I ask you something? You can ask. That night you said you weren't a cop, but you had emergency lights in your car. Why? Adriana's expression didn't change. Sometimes I need to get places quickly. That's not an answer. No, she agreed. It's not. Caleb almost pushed, almost demanded a real answer, but something in Adriana's eyes stopped him. A wall. A line he wasn't supposed to cross. Okay, he said. He left. Rebecca was waiting in the hallway. She walked him to the door without a word. As Caleb stepped outside, she said, Mr. Vance? He turned. She doesn't do this, Rebecca said. Help people. Get involved. She keeps her distance from everyone. But for some reason, she's made an exception for you. I didn't ask her to. I know. Rebecca's expression was unreadable. Just don't make her regret it. The door closed. Caleb walked down the steps and headed home, the envelope heavy in his pocket, Rebecca's warning echoing in his head. The money changed things. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, in ways that mattered. Caleb paid off Emma's medical bills. All of them. The ones from the asthma attack, and the ones from 6 months ago, and the ones he'd been chipping away at for 2 years. Gone. He bought her new clothes. Not from the thrift store, but from an actual kid's store where everything was bright and clean and didn't have someone else's name written on the tag. He fixed the heat in the apartment, called a real repairman instead of trying to duct tape it himself. He even put some money aside, a savings account for Emma, something he'd never been able to do before. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt like he could breathe. But guilt gnawed at him. Every time he used the money, he thought about Adriana, about the fact that she'd given him something he could never repay. About the way she'd looked at him in her office, like she understood exactly what he was going through. He didn't like owing her, so he did something stupid. He looked her up, not just the basic stuff everyone knew. CEO of Heir Industries, billionaire, recluse. He went deeper. Found old articles from business magazines, profiles from years ago, back when she'd first started making waves in the corporate world. Adriana Hale had built her empire from nothing, just like she'd said. She'd started with a single real estate investment at 23 and turned it into a fortune by 30. Aggressive acquisitions, ruthless negotiations, a reputation for being cold, calculating, untouchable. The press called her the Ice Queen. Employees called her demanding. Competitors called her terrifying. But none of the articles mentioned her mother. None of them mentioned her father. None of them mentioned anything personal at all. It was like Adriana Hale had erased her past and built herself into something else entirely. Caleb didn't know what to make of that. 3 weeks after their meeting, Emma got sick again. Not asthma this time, just a cold. A normal, run-of-the-mill cold that any 2-year-old might get. But Caleb panicked anyway. He called the pediatrician, made an appointment for the next day, spent the night checking Emma's breathing every 20 minutes, his heart pounding every time she coughed. She was fine. The doctor confirmed it. Just a cold, plenty of fluids, rest. She'd be back to normal in a few days. Caleb felt like an idiot. "You're doing fine," the doctor said kindly. "It's normal to worry after what you went through." But it didn't feel normal. It felt like he was one bad night away from losing her all over again. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Caleb sat on the couch and stared at his phone. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled up Rebecca's number. She'd texted him once, confirming the meeting, and typed out a message. "Is Adriana available? I need to talk to her." He hit send before he could delete it. The response came 5 minutes later. "She's in a meeting until 8. I can schedule something for next week." Caleb typed back. "It's not urgent. Just wanted to say thanks again." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "She says you can call her directly if you need to. I'm sending you her number." Caleb stared at the screen. A moment later, a contact appeared. Adriana Hale. A phone number. He didn't call, but he saved the number. 2 days later, his car broke down. Not the transmission, not the engine. The whole damn car just gave up. Caleb was on his way to work when it happened. The Civic started making a grinding noise that sounded like a garbage disposal trying to eat a brick, and then it shuddered to a stop in the middle of the street. He coasted to the shoulder, popped the hood, and stared at the engine like it might explain itself. It didn't. A mechanic came and towed it to a shop. The diagnosis was grim. "Your transmission's shot," the guy said. "Engine's not much better. I can fix it, but it's going to cost you $3,000. Maybe more." Caleb didn't have $3,000. Not anymore. He'd spent most of the money Adriana gave him on Emma and the apartment and catching up on bills. "How much for a patch job?" Caleb asked. "Just enough to get it running." The mechanic shook his head. "This thing's on life support, man. Patch job's not going to cut it." Caleb called his boss at Davidson Logistics and explained the situation. His boss was understanding but firm. "If you can't get to work, I can't keep you on the schedule. I'll give you a week to figure it out, but after that, I gotta fill your spot." Caleb hung up and sat on the curb outside the mechanic's shop, staring at the dead Civic. He could take the bus, but the bus didn't run late enough to get him home after his shift, and he couldn't afford a different car. And without the car, he couldn't work. And without work, he couldn't pay rent. The whole fragile structure of his life was collapsing again, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Yeah?" "Mr. Vance, it's Rebecca Chu. Ms. Hale asked me to check in. She heard about your car." Caleb's stomach dropped. "How did she—" "She has her ways." Rebecca's tone was brisk. "She wanted me to let you know there's a vehicle waiting for you at Prestige Auto on 7th Street. It's been registered in your name." "What?" "A car, Mr. Vance. She bought you a car." Caleb shot to his feet. "No, absolutely not. I didn't ask for—" "She knows you didn't ask. She's doing it anyway. Tell her I don't want it. Tell her yourself." Rebecca's voice was dry. "She gave you her number for a reason." The line went dead. Caleb stood on the curb, shaking with anger and frustration, and something else he couldn't name. He pulled up Adriana's contact and called. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Vance?" I don't want your car. Good evening to you too. I'm serious. I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept. Can you get to work without a car? Adriana's voice was calm, maddeningly reasonable. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You have a daughter who depends on you. You can't support her if you lose your job because you don't have reliable transportation. I'll figure it out. How? Caleb didn't have an answer. The car is yours, Adriana said. It's registered, insured, paid in full. You can drive it, or you can let it sit in the lot and gather dust. Your choice. Why are you doing this? Caleb's voice cracked. Why do you keep helping me? Adriana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because no one helped my father, she said. And I watched him break because of it. I won't watch that happen to someone else if I can prevent it. Caleb closed his eyes. I can't keep taking things from you. Then don't think of it as taking. Think of it as accepting. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Adriana's tone was firm. Taking implies you demanded it. Accepting means you're allowing someone to help you because they want to. There's a difference. Caleb let out a shaky breath. What if I can't pay you back? Then you can't. I'm not keeping a ledger, Mr. Vance. You should be. Why? Because that's what people like me are supposed to do? There was an edge to her voice now. Keep score. Make sure every transaction balances. Treat kindness like a business deal. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, Adriana sighed. Go to Prestige Auto. Pick up the car. Drive it to work. Take care of your daughter. That's all I'm asking. Caleb stood there, his throat tight, his pride warring with his desperation. Okay, he said finally. Good. But I'm paying you back, he added. Somehow. I don't know how yet, but I will. If it makes you feel better. Adriana's voice softened again. Good night, Mr. Vance. She hung up. Caleb stood on the curb for another 5 minutes, staring at his phone, before finally calling a rideshare to take him to Prestige Auto. The car was a Honda CR-V, 3 years old. Nothing fancy, but clean and reliable. The sales guy handed him the keys like it was the most normal thing in the world. Caleb sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, and tried not to cry. He failed. That night, after he picked up Emma from daycare and drove her home in the new car, she was delighted by the cup holders and the way the seat warmed up. Caleb made dinner and put her to bed. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Adriana's number. He typed out a message. Thank you. I mean it. I don't know how to repay you, but I'll find a way. The response came a few minutes later. You already have. Take care of Emma. That's enough. Caleb stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back. Can I buy you coffee sometime? Just to say thanks properly. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I don't drink coffee, Caleb almost smiled. Tea? I can do tea. When? I'll have Rebecca reach out. Caleb set the phone down and leaned back on the couch, exhausted and relieved and still not entirely sure what the hell was happening to his life. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was going to be okay. The tea never happened. Rebecca called 3 days later to reschedule, her voice crisp and apologetic in that way that suggested she'd made this exact call 100 times before. Ms. Hale had an emergency board meeting, then a crisis with a supplier in Seattle, then something else Caleb didn't quite catch because Emma was throwing a tantrum about wearing shoes. We'll find another time, Rebecca said. But they didn't. Weeks passed. Caleb drove the CRV to work, dropped Emma at daycare, picked her up, made dinner, put her to bed. The rhythm of his life continued, except now it was slightly easier. The car didn't break down. The heat worked. Emma's medical bills were paid. He should have been grateful. He was grateful. But something nagged at him, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It took him 3 weeks to realize what it was. He missed her, missed talking to Adriana, missed the way she listened when he spoke, like his words actually mattered. Missed the strange comfort of being around someone who didn't treat him like a charity case even when she was helping him. He picked up his phone a dozen times to call her. Never did. What would he even say? Thanks again for the car? Want to grab that tea we never scheduled? By the way, I can't stop thinking about you even though you're a billionaire and I'm nobody. So he didn't call. And then 5 weeks after their last conversation, Caleb came home from his shift at the warehouse to find Adriana sitting on the steps outside his apartment building. She looked different, exhausted. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She wore the same charcoal suit she'd had on the night of the storm, except now it was wrinkled, like she'd been wearing it for days. Caleb stopped on the sidewalk, Emma asleep in his arms. "Adriana?" She looked up, and the relief on her face was almost painful to see. "Hi. What are you doing here? It's almost midnight." "I know." She stood, brushing off her pants. "I'm sorry. I should have called. I needed to see you." Caleb shifted Emma's weight against his shoulder. "Is everything okay?" "No." Adriana's voice was flat. "Not really." He unlocked the door and led her upstairs, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Emma. Inside the apartment, he laid his daughter in her bed, pulled the blanket over her, and returned to the living room. Adriana was standing by the window, staring out at the street below. "Do you want coffee?" Caleb asked. "Or water, or—" "I'm stepping down." Caleb froze. "What?" "From Heir Industries. I'm stepping down as CEO." Adriana turned to face him, and her expression was completely blank. "The board voted this afternoon. They're making it look like it was my decision, but it wasn't. They forced me out." Caleb sank onto the couch. "Because of the investigation?" "Partly. Mostly because I've been making decisions they don't agree with." She crossed her arms, defensive. "The safety reforms cost money. The compensation fund cost more. I shut down 3 facilities that weren't up to code, which cost even more. And I refused to settle quietly with the families affected by Riverside. I wanted everything public, transparent. That's the right thing to do. The board doesn't care about right. They care about profit." Adriana's voice was bitter. "So they staged a coup, very polite, very corporate, but a coup nonetheless." Caleb didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Adriana finally moved, walking over to the couch and sitting down heavily. "I should have seen it coming. I've been distracted." "Distracted by what?" She looked at him, and there was something raw in her eyes. "By you." The air between them went still. "By me," Caleb repeated slowly. "I can't stop thinking about you," Adriana said, her voice quiet but steady. "About Emma. About that night we had tea that never happened. About how I keep finding excuses to drive past your building even though it's nowhere near my office." Caleb's heart was pounding. "Adriana, I know it's ridiculous." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "You're right. We're from completely different worlds. I have no business being here. But I lost my company today, and the first person I wanted to see was you." Caleb stared at her, at this woman who'd saved his daughter, who'd given him more than he could ever repay, who was sitting in his cramped apartment looking more lost than he'd ever seen her. "You didn't lose your company," he said. "You lost a job. It's the same thing." "No, it's not." Caleb leaned forward. "Heir Industries was never you. It was something you built, but it's not who you are." "Then who am I?" The question came out desperate. "I've been the CEO of Heir Industries for 15 years. That's my identity. That's what I do. If I'm not that, then what am I?" "You're the woman who drove a stranger's kid to the hospital in a thunderstorm," Caleb said. "You're the woman who paid medical bills she didn't have to pay, who bought a car for someone she barely knew, who shut down factories because it was the right thing to do, even though it cost you everything." Adriana's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's not enough." "Why not?" "Because I don't know how to be just a person." Her voice cracked. "I've spent my entire adult life being in control, making decisions, running things. If I'm not doing that, I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Caleb reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "You figure it out, one day at a time." "I don't know how." "Nobody does." He squeezed her hand. "But you don't have to figure it out alone." Adriana looked down at their joined hands. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly. "I'm not good at asking for help." "I noticed." She laughed again, and this time it was real. "I'm a mess." "Welcome to the club." Caleb smiled. "We meet every day at 6 a.m. when Emma decides sleep is optional." Adriana's smile was watery but genuine. They sat there for a long moment, hands still clasped, the silence comfortable despite everything. Can I stay? Adriana asked finally. Just for a little while. I don't want to go back to my apartment. It's too quiet. Yeah. Caleb let go of her hand and stood. Let me get you a blanket. The couch isn't great, but it's... I don't need the couch. Adriana looked up at him. Can I just sit here? With you? Caleb sat back down. Yeah, of course. They stayed like that until dawn, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. Adriana told him about the board meeting, about the way they'd systematically dismantled every argument she'd made, about the look on their faces when they'd asked for her resignation. Caleb told her about Emma's latest obsession with space, about the rocket ship they'd tried to build out of cardboard boxes that had collapsed immediately, about the way his daughter said astronaut like it had 17 syllables. At some point, Adriana's head ended up on his shoulder. At some point, Caleb's arm ended up around her. It felt right in a way that terrified him. When the sun started creeping through the windows, Emma's door creaked open. She padded into the living room, rubbing her eyes, and stopped when she saw Adriana. Miss Adriana! She ran over and climbed onto the couch between them. Are you having a sleepover? Adriana smiled, some of the exhaustion lifting from her face. Something like that. Did you bring pajamas? I didn't. Emma looked scandalized. You can't have a sleepover without pajamas. That's the rule. I'll remember that for next time, Adriana said seriously. Can you make pancakes? Emma asked, looking between them hopefully. Caleb laughed. I can make pancakes. Miss Adriana probably has to get going. Actually, Adriana said, I don't have anywhere to be. If you don't mind the company. Emma cheered. They made pancakes together in the tiny kitchen, Emma standing on a chair to help mix the batter while Adriana watched with an expression that looked almost wistful. Caleb burned the first two, but the third batch came out okay. They ate at the small table, Emma chattering about her plans to visit the moon someday, Adriana asking questions and listening with genuine interest. It was domestic, normal, completely surreal. After breakfast, Adriana's phone started ringing. She ignored it the first 3 times, but on the 4th, she finally checked it. It's Rebecca, she said. I should... Take it, Caleb said. We'll be here. Adriana stepped into the hallway. Caleb could hear her voice through the door, low and tense. When she came back 5 minutes later, she looked different, harder, more like the CEO he'd first met. I have to go, she said. There are things I need to handle. Legal paperwork, transition meetings. Okay. Adriana crouched down to Emma's level. Thank you for sharing your pancakes with me. You're welcome. Emma hugged her fiercely. Come back soon, okay? I will, Adriana promised. She stood and looked at Caleb. Can I call you later? Yeah, anytime. She left and the apartment felt emptier without her. Over the next few days, Caleb watched the news coverage of Adriana's departure from Heir Industries. The press painted it as a voluntary resignation, a billionaire stepping back to pursue other interests. But Caleb knew the truth. She called him every night. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes just a few minutes. She never said she was lonely, but Caleb could hear it in her voice. What are you going to do now? He asked one night after Emma had gone to bed. I don't know. Adriana sounded tired. I have offers. Other companies want me on their boards. Investment firms want my money. Everyone wants something. What do you want? Silence. I want to matter, she said finally. I want to do something that actually makes a difference, not just make rich people richer. So do that. It's not that simple. Why not? Another pause. Because I'm scared. I've spent 15 years being the person everyone expects me to be. I don't know if I remember how to be anything else. Caleb thought about that, about how he'd spent 7 years just trying to survive, never thinking about what he actually wanted, never thinking beyond the next shift, the next bill, the next crisis. Maybe it's time we both figure out who we actually are, he said, instead of who we're supposed to be. That sounds terrifying. Yeah. Caleb smiled even though she couldn't see it. But maybe we can be terrified together. Adriana laughed softly. I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Adriana showed up at the apartment with a box of Chinese takeout and a proposal. I'm starting a foundation, she said, unpacking containers onto the coffee table while Emma helped by stealing spring rolls. focused on workplace safety and workers' rights, real oversight, real accountability. I want to make sure what happened at Riverside never happens anywhere else. Caleb set down his chopsticks. That's ambitious. I have the money. I have the connections. And thanks to the investigation, I have proof that the current system doesn't work. Adriana looked at him. But I need someone who actually understands what it's like. Someone who's been there. You want me to work for you? I want you to work with me. She pulled out a folder and handed it to him. I'm offering you a position as Director of Worker Advocacy. You'd help develop policies, review safety protocols, work directly with employees at companies we partner with. Caleb opened the folder. The salary listed made his head spin. I can't. You can. Adriana's voice was firm. You filed those reports at Riverside. You testified even when you didn't have to. You know what needs to change because you've lived it. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience with this kind of thing. You have something better. You have credibility. She leaned forward. When you talk about safety violations, people will listen. Because you're not some consultant or lawyer. You're someone who's been hurt by the system and survived. Caleb looked at Emma, who was attempting to use chopsticks and mostly just flinging rice everywhere. He thought about the factory, about the men who died, about the reports that had been ignored. If I do this, he said slowly, I do it my way. No corporate bullshit, no covering things up to protect the bottom line. That's exactly what I want. And I'm keeping my job at the warehouse, at least for now. He struggled to find the words. I need to know I can still do the work, that I'm not just some guy in an office who forgot where he came from. Adriana nodded. Fair enough. And Emma comes first, always. If she gets sick, if she needs me, I'm gone. No questions asked. I wouldn't have it any other way. Caleb stared at the folder, at the number that could change everything, at the chance to actually make a difference instead of just surviving. Okay, he said. I'm in. Adriana smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. Good. We start Monday. The foundation offices were nothing like Heir Industries. No marble, no glass, just a renovated warehouse in an industrial neighborhood with exposed brick and high ceilings and windows that actually opened. I wanted it to feel accessible, Adriana explained on Caleb's first day. Not like some corporate tower where regular people are afraid to walk in. There were only 5 employees to start. A lawyer named Marcus, who specialized in labor law, a former OSHA inspector named Chen, a data analyst named Priya. Rebecca, who'd apparently quit Heir Industries the same day Adriana did and followed her here. And Caleb. The work was harder than he'd expected. He spent weeks touring factories, talking to workers, reviewing incident reports. He learned about regulations he'd never heard of, legal frameworks he didn't understand, the complex machinery of how workplace safety was supposed to work versus how it actually did. But he was good at it. Workers trusted him in a way they didn't trust the lawyers or inspectors. He spoke their language, knew their concerns, didn't talk down to them or dismiss their complaints. And slowly, the foundation started making a difference. They partnered with 3 companies to overhaul their safety protocols. They published a report on workplace violations that got picked up by national media. They successfully lobbied for stricter enforcement of existing regulations. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Caleb found himself working late most nights, fueled by coffee and the kind of purpose he'd never felt at the warehouse. Adriana was usually there too, reviewing proposals or meeting with potential partners or just sitting in her office staring at spreadsheets. They fell into a rhythm. Caleb would pick up Emma from daycare, bring her to the office, and she'd do her homework at the conference table while he finished up. Adriana always had snacks ready, the good kind, not the stale vending machine crackers Caleb usually grabbed. You're spoiling her, Caleb said one evening, watching Emma munch on organic apple slices. Someone has to. Adriana smiled. You feed her chicken nuggets for dinner. Chicken nuggets are a perfectly balanced meal. They're breaded and fried. Exactly. Grains and protein. Adriana laughed, and the sound filled the office in a way that made Caleb's chest tighten. They were becoming something. He didn't know what to call it. Friends seemed too simple. Colleagues didn't cover it. But there was something between them, something that grew stronger every time she stayed late to help Emma with her math homework, every time he brought her coffee the way she liked it without asking, every time their hands brushed reaching for the same file. Emma noticed. "Are you and Miss Adriana dating?" she asked one night in the car. Caleb nearly ran a red light. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because you smile at her the way Prince Eric smiles at Ariel." "I do not." "You do." Emma was matter of fact. "And she smiles at you the same way, so I think you should be dating." "It's not that simple, baby." "Why not?" "Because," Caleb struggled, "because grown-up relationships are complicated." "That's dumb." Emma crossed her arms. "If you like someone and they like you should just tell them." Out of the mouths of toddlers, Caleb thought. That Friday, Adriana asked if he wanted to get dinner after work. Not takeout at the office. Actual dinner, at a restaurant. Caleb panicked. "Like, just us?" "Unless you want to bring Emma. She's with my neighbor tonight, Friday movie night." "So just us, then." Adriana's expression was carefully neutral. "If you want?" Yeah, I want." They went to a small Italian place in Adriana's neighborhood. Nothing fancy, despite what Caleb had feared. Just red checkered tablecloths and decent wine and pasta that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it. They talked about work, about the foundation's next project, about Emma's upcoming birthday. And then Adriana said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That night I showed up at your apartment, after the board meeting." She fidgeted with her wine glass. "You said I didn't have to figure things out alone. Did you mean that?" Caleb met her eyes. "Yeah, I meant it. Because I'm still figuring it out. Who I am without the company, what I want, how to be—" She gestured vaguely. "A person, not just a CEO." "You're already a person, Adriana." "I know, but I'm not good at it." She set down her glass. "I don't have friends. Not real ones. I don't know how to do normal things like have dinner without it being a business meeting. I don't know how to let people in." "You let me in." "Because you didn't give me a choice." She smiled. "You and Emma you crashed into my life and refused to leave." "We're stubborn like that." "I'm glad you are." Adriana's voice went soft. "Because I don't want you to leave. Either of you." Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. "We're not going anywhere." They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped over red-checked cloth, the restaurant humming with conversation around them. "So what now?" Adriana asked. "Now we finish our pasta." Caleb squeezed her hand. "And then we figure out the rest as we go." "That's not much of a plan." "No," Caleb agreed. "But it's ours." Adriana smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked completely at peace. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while Caleb was eating cereal with Emma before dropping her off at daycare. She was chattering about a picture she'd drawn, something involving a purple dinosaur in a spaceship, when his phone buzzed on the counter. The subject line made his stomach drop. Heir Industries, Legal Department. Caleb's hand froze halfway to his mouth, the spoon dripping milk back into the bowl. He set it down carefully and opened the email. It was a notice. Formal. Cold. The kind of language that didn't waste words. Heir Industries was conducting an internal audit of its manufacturing division. As part of the process, they were reviewing all workplace incidents from the past decade. Caleb's name had come up in connection with an accident at the Riverside facility 7 years ago. They were requesting his cooperation in providing testimony. Caleb read it 3 times, his heart pounding harder with each pass. The Riverside facility, the factory accident, the day his entire life had imploded. "Daddy?" Emma tugged on his sleeve. "You not eating?" Caleb forced himself to look at her, forced himself to smile. "Just checking something, baby. Finish your cereal." But his mind was spinning. Why now? Why after 7 years? He'd tried to forget Riverside, tried to bury the memory of that day. The explosion, the screaming, the way the safety inspector had looked at him like he was personally responsible even though Caleb had filed 3 reports about the faulty equipment and been ignored every single time. The settlement had been a joke. Heir Industries had offered him $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Take the money, keep his mouth shut, go away. He'd taken it because he had no choice. Sarah was pregnant. They needed the money. And fighting a corporation with unlimited legal resources wasn't something a 25-year-old warehouse worker could afford to do. So he'd signed, and then Sarah left anyway, and the money ran out, and Caleb spent the next 7 years trying to survive. He stared at the email until the words blurred. Heir Industries. Adriana's company. The realization hit him like a freight train. Adriana owned the company that had destroyed his life. He grabbed his phone and pulled up her number. His finger hovered over the call button. Then he stopped. What was he going to say? Did you know? Did you know your company ruined me? Of course she didn't know. She ran a billion-dollar empire. She didn't personally oversee every factory, every accident, every payout. But it was still her company, her name on the building, her profits built on the backs of people like him. Caleb set the phone down and pressed his palms against his eyes. Emma climbed down from her chair and padded over to him, wrapping her small arms around his leg. Daddy said? He picked her up and held her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. No, baby. I'm okay. But he wasn't. He didn't call Adriana. He didn't respond to the email. He spent the day on autopilot. Drop Emma at daycare, drive to work, move boxes, ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. But that night, after Emma was asleep, he pulled out the box he kept in the back of his closet. It was full of things he hadn't looked at in years. The settlement paperwork, medical records from the hospital, photos from before the accident, when he and Sarah had still been happy, and underneath it all, a folder labeled Riverside. Caleb opened it. Inside were copies of the incident reports he'd filed. 3 of them, each one detailing the same problem, faulty pressure valves in the main assembly line. Each one stamped with the same response. Under review. Nothing had been done. And then the explosion happened. 2 workers had been killed. 5 more injured, including Caleb. He'd gotten off light, 2nd-degree burns on his arm, a concussion, 3 cracked ribs. The other guys weren't so lucky. Heir Industries had paid out settlements to all of them. Quiet, efficient, with enough legal paperwork to make sure none of them ever spoke about it again. Caleb pulled out his phone and searched for news about the Riverside facility. The first result made his blood run cold. Heir Industries faces federal investigation over safety violations. The article was dated 2 weeks ago. He skimmed through it, his hands shaking. The investigation had been triggered by a whistleblower, someone inside the company who'd leaked internal documents showing that Heir Industries had known about safety issues at multiple facilities and ignored them for years. Riverside was mentioned by name. So were 4 other factories. The article included statements from former employees, testimonies about ignored reports, unsafe conditions, pressure to meet production quotas no matter the cost. Caleb felt sick. This wasn't just about him. This was systemic. This was a pattern, and Adriana was at the center of it. He called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. Caleb, it's late. Is everything all right? Her voice was calm, warm even, like they were friends, like she hadn't just been implicated in a federal investigation. Did you know? Caleb's voice was low, tight. About Riverside. Silence. Caleb, did you know? Adriana exhaled slowly. I knew there was an incident. I knew settlements were paid. I didn't know the details. You didn't know your company killed 2 people because they ignored safety reports. That's not... She stopped. Where are you getting this information? It's all over the news. There's a federal investigation. Your company is being accused of covering up safety violations at multiple facilities. Caleb's voice shook. And Riverside is one of them. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm looking into it, Adriana said finally. I only found out about the investigation last week. My legal team is handling it. Your legal team? Caleb laughed bitterly. Of course. That's what you people do, right? Throw lawyers at it until it goes away. That's not fair. Fair? Caleb stood up, pacing the small living room. You want to talk about fair? I filed 3 reports about those valves. 3. Nobody did anything, and then the whole place blew up, and your company paid me $50,000 to shut up and disappear. I didn't know. Shit. You should have known. His voice rose, and he forced himself to lower it before he woke Emma. You run the company. You're responsible. You're right. That stopped him cold. What? You're right, Adriana said quietly. I am responsible. If my company ignored safety reports, if people died because of negligence, that's on me. I should have known. I should have done better. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. I'm not going to make excuses, Adriana continued. I can't undo what happened, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. How? By cooperating with the investigation, by firing everyone who covered this up, by implementing new safety protocols across every facility. Her voice was firm now, resolute. And by making sure every person who was affected gets the compensation they deserve. It's too late for that. Maybe, but I'm going to try anyway. Caleb sank back onto the couch, his anger draining away into exhaustion. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know you were connected to it until tonight. Adriana's voice softened. I didn't know you worked at Riverside. You ran a background check on me. A basic one. Employment history, criminal record. I didn't dig into the details. She paused. I should have. I'm sorry. Caleb rubbed his face. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. If you want to testify against the company, I'll support that too. You'd support me testifying against your own company? If it's the truth, yes. Caleb let out a long breath. I don't understand you. Most people don't. There was a faint hint of sadness in her voice. But I meant what I said, Caleb. I'm not going to defend something that's indefensible. They sat in silence for a moment, the phone line crackling softly between them. I need time, Caleb said finally, to think about this. Take all the time you need. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, Caleb dropped Emma off at daycare and drove to the Riverside facility. He hadn't been back since the accident, hadn't wanted to, but now he needed to see it. The building was still there, though it looked different, newer. They'd rebuilt after the explosion, scrubbed away the evidence. The parking lot was full of cars. Workers streamed in and out during shift changes. Caleb sat in the CRV across the street and stared at the entrance. He thought about the men who'd died. Carlos Martinez, who'd had 3 kids. Jamie Holloway, who'd been 2 weeks away from retirement. Both of them gone because someone decided meeting production quotas was more important than fixing a valve. And Caleb had taken the money and walked away. He pulled out his phone and called the number listed on the email from Heir Industries' legal department. A woman answered. Legal department, this is Monica. This is Caleb Vance. I got an email about the Riverside incident. You wanted my testimony. Yes, Mr. Vance, thank you for calling. We'd like to schedule an interview at your earliest convenience. I'll do it, Caleb said. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the guys who didn't make it out. Monica was quiet for a moment. Understood. When are you available? They scheduled the interview for Friday. Caleb spent the next 3 days preparing. He dug out every document he had from the accident, read through the settlement paperwork, made notes about everything he remembered. He didn't tell Adriana. The interview took place in a conference room at a law firm downtown. Monica was there, along with 2 other lawyers and a court reporter. They asked him to walk through everything, the reports he'd filed, the responses he'd received, the day of the explosion. Caleb answered every question honestly. He told them about the faulty valves, about the pressure from management to keep the line running no matter what, about the men who died. The lawyers took notes, asked follow-up questions, thanked him for his time. It was over in 2 hours. Caleb left the building feeling hollow. He drove to the park where he sometimes took Emma on weekends and sat on a bench, staring at the empty playground. His phone rang. Adriana. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. I heard you gave your testimony, she said. Caleb's jaw tightened. Your lawyers work fast. They're thorough. She paused. Thank you. For what? For telling the truth. Caleb let out a harsh laugh. You're thanking me for testifying against your company? I'm thanking you for doing the right thing. Adriana's voice was steady. I know it wasn't easy. It shouldn't have been necessary. No, it shouldn't have. She was quiet for a moment. I'm restructuring the entire manufacturing division. Everyone involved in covering up those reports is being terminated. I'm bringing in an independent safety consultant to audit every facility. That doesn't bring back the men who died. I know. Her voice was soft. But it's a start. Caleb didn't respond. I'm also setting up a fund, Adriana continued. For the families of the workers who were killed or injured, retroactive compensation, no NDAs, no legal restrictions. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. She paused. And because I want you to help me distribute it. Caleb blinked. What? You were there. You know what happened. You know who was affected. Adriana's tone was firm. I don't trust my legal department to handle this. I trust you. You barely know me. I know enough. There was something in her voice, something raw and real. I know you filed those reports, even though no one listened. I know you've spent 7 years trying to survive and take care of your daughter. I know you're not doing this for money or revenge. You're doing it because it's right. Caleb's throat tightened. I don't want your money. It's not my money, it's theirs. The families, the workers, the people my company failed. Adriana's voice was quiet but unyielding. Help me make sure it gets to the right people. Caleb closed his eyes. This doesn't fix what happened. No, but it's better than doing nothing. He sat there for a long time, the phone pressed to his ear, the wind rustling through the trees. Okay, he said finally. I'll help. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb worked with Adriana and a small team she'd assembled to identify every worker who'd been affected by the Riverside incident and the other facilities under investigation. It was harder than he'd expected. Some people had moved, some had died, some didn't want anything to do with Heir Industries ever again. But Caleb kept at it. He made calls, tracked down addresses, explained what Adriana was trying to do. Most people were skeptical. A few were hostile, but slowly they started to trust him. Because Caleb had been there. He'd lived it. He wasn't some corporate lawyer trying to make the problem go away. He was one of them. Adriana stayed in the background, but she was always available. She answered Caleb's questions, approved every compensation offer, never once tried to negotiate down. They talked almost every day, sometimes about the fund, sometimes about other things. Caleb learned that Adriana worked 16-hour days, that she lived alone in a penthouse she rarely saw, that she didn't have friends, not really, just employees and business associates. Don't you get lonely? He asked one night during a call. She was quiet for a moment. Loneliness is a choice. No, it's not. It is when you've built walls high enough to keep everyone out. Caleb frowned. Why would you do that? Because it's easier. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. People want things from you, your time, your money, your attention. It's easier to just not let them in. That sounds like a terrible way to live. It is. She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. But it's safe. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. 3 weeks into the project, Adriana invited him to her office to review the final list of recipients. Caleb brought Emma with him. He didn't have anyone to watch her, and Rebecca had assured him it was fine. Emma was delighted. She'd never been in an office building like this, tall ceilings, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the entire city. Adriana met them in the lobby. She looked different, less formal. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Emma stared at her with wide eyes. You're pretty. Adriana blinked, clearly taken off guard. Thank you. Do you have a princess castle? Caleb groaned. Emma, that's not... I don't, Adriana said seriously. But I have an office with a very big window. Would you like to see it? Emma nodded enthusiastically. They took the elevator to the top floor. Emma chattered the entire way, asking questions about the buttons and the lights, and whether Adriana had ever been stuck in the elevator. Adriana answered every question with the kind of patience Caleb hadn't expected. The office was massive, windows on 3 sides. A desk that looked like it cost more than Caleb's car. Shelves lined with books and awards. Emma ran straight to the window. Daddy, look! I can see everything! Caleb followed her, placing a hand on her shoulder to keep her from pressing her face against the glass. Yeah, baby, it's pretty high up. Adriana stood a few feet away, watching them. There was something in her expression, something soft and unguarded. She's beautiful, Adriana said quietly. She is. Caleb smiled. And she knows it. They worked for an hour, going through the list while Emma drew pictures on a notepad Rebecca had provided. Adriana approved every name, every number, no hesitation. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair. That's it then. That's it. Caleb closed his laptop. The funds should start going out next week. Good. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Emma hummed to herself as she drew, completely absorbed. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "Of course." "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because it's the right thing. There's something else." Adriana looked out the window, her gaze distant. "When I built this company, I told myself I'd never become the kind of person who valued profit over people. I'd seen what that did to my family. I swore I'd be different." She turned to look at him. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped paying attention. I delegated too much, trusted the wrong people, and people died because of it. That's not entirely your fault." "Yes, it is." Her voice was firm. "I own this company. I'm responsible for everything that happens under my name, and I failed." Caleb didn't argue. "I can't fix the past," Adriana continued, "but I can try to do better going forward, and part of that means acknowledging what went wrong and making amends. Even if it costs you? Especially if it costs me." She smiled faintly. "Money is easy to replace. Integrity isn't." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Miss Adriana, I made you a picture." She held up the notepad. It was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, with long hair, one medium-sized, and one very small. "That's you," Emma said, pointing to the tall figure. "And that's Daddy, and that's me. We're a family." Adriana stared at the drawing, her expression unreadable. Then, very carefully, she took the notepad. "Thank you, Emma. It's beautiful." Emma beamed. "You can keep it." "I will." Caleb watched Adriana's face, saw the way her eyes softened, the way her fingers traced the edge of the paper. And he realized something. Adriana Hale wasn't just lonely. She was alone. That night, after Emma was asleep, Caleb sat on the couch and stared at his phone. He thought about the past few weeks, the investigation, the fund, the hours he'd spent working alongside Adriana. She'd been nothing but honest with him, nothing but committed to making things right. And Caleb had spent most of that time waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for her to reveal some ulterior motive, waiting for her to be the villain he'd decided she was. But she wasn't. She was just a person, flawed, trying, doing her best with the mess she'd inherited. He picked up his phone and texted her, "Thank you. For everything. I mean it." The response came a few minutes later. "Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right." Caleb stared at the message. Then he typed, "Emma wants to know if you'd like to come to dinner sometime. Fair warning, it's mac and cheese and chicken nuggets." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "I'd like that." Caleb smiled. "Sunday, 6 p.m.? I'll be there." He set the phone down and leaned back on the couch, feeling something shift in his chest. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe letting Adriana into his life, into Emma's life, was going to end badly. But for the first time in 7 years, Caleb thought maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. Sunday arrived with the kind of cold that made the city feel sharper, clearer. Caleb spent the afternoon cleaning the apartment. Not that there was much to clean in a place this small, but he vacuumed anyway, wiped down the counters, hid the stack of unpaid bills under a dish towel. Emma helped by rearranging her stuffed animals on the couch, approximately 40 times. "Is Miss Adriana coming soon?" she asked for the 10th time in an hour. "Soon, baby. She'll be here at 6. Does she like dinosaurs?" Caleb paused mid-wipe. "I don't know." "Why?" Emma held up her favorite toy, a plastic T-Rex with one arm missing. "I want to show her Mr. Chompy." "I'm sure she'll love Mr. Chompy." At 5:45, Caleb checked himself in the bathroom mirror. He'd changed his shirt 3 times before settling on a plain gray Henley that didn't have any visible stains. His hair was still damp from the shower. He looked tired, but that was normal. He always looked tired. The knock came at exactly 6 o'clock. Caleb opened the door and found Adriana standing in the hallway, holding a bakery box tied with string. She wore dark jeans and a cream sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No jewelry, no armor. She looked nervous. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Caleb stepped aside. "Come in." Adriana entered the apartment slowly, taking in the small space, the sagging couch, the scratched coffee table, the kitchen that was barely big enough for 2 people. Her gaze lingered on Emma's drawings taped to the refrigerator. I brought dessert, she said, holding up the box. I wasn't sure what Emma liked, so I got a variety. Cupcakes, cookies, some kind of tart thing the woman at the bakery said was popular. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Adriana set the box on the counter. I don't get invited to dinner very often. Emma appeared from the hallway, clutching Mr. Chompy to her chest. She stopped when she saw Adriana, suddenly shy. Adriana crouched down to Emma's level. Hi, Emma. Do you remember me? Emma nodded solemnly. Then she held out the dinosaur. This is Mr. Chompy. He's missing an arm, but he's still good at eating people. Adriana took the dinosaur carefully, examining it like it was a priceless artifact. He looks very fierce. What happened to his arm? Daddy stepped on it, Caleb groaned. It was an accident. Mr. Chompy forgives you, Emma announced, but he says you have to be more careful. I'll try. Adriana handed the dinosaur back. Thank you for introducing us. Emma beamed and ran back to her pile of stuffed animals. Caleb started pulling out plates and utensils. I hope you weren't expecting anything fancy. It's literally just mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. That sounds perfect. Adriana leaned against the counter. Can I help? You can keep Emma entertained. That's usually a full-time job. Adriana smiled and walked over to where Emma was arranging her toys in some elaborate scenario that involved a spaceship, 3 bears, and a plastic teacup. Caleb watched them while he stirred the pot of macaroni. Adriana sat cross-legged on the floor, listening intently as Emma explained the rules of the game. At one point, Emma handed her a stuffed rabbit and informed her that she was now the Queen of the Moon. Adriana played along without hesitation. Something in Caleb's chest tightened. Dinner was chaotic in the way meals with a 2-year-old always were. Emma insisted on sitting next to Adriana and spent most of the meal asking questions at a pace that would have exhausted a professional interrogator. Do you have a house? I have an apartment. Is it big? Pretty big. Do you have toys? No. Emma looked scandalized. Why not? I never thought to get any. That's sad. Emma reached over and patted Adriana's hand. You can borrow Mr. Chompy if you want. Adriana's expression softened. That's very kind of you. Caleb cleared his throat. Let Miss Adriana eat, okay? She's fine, Adriana said quietly. She looked at Emma. What's your favorite thing to do? Drawing and playing outside and watching the moon. You like the moon? Emma nodded enthusiastically. It's pretty, and it's always there, even when you can't see it. Adriana was quiet for a moment. That's a very smart observation. I know. Emma took a bite of mac and cheese, leaving an orange smear on her chin. After dinner, Caleb cleaned up while Adriana helped Emma set up an elaborate fort made of couch cushions and blankets. By the time he finished washing dishes, they'd constructed something that looked like it might collapse at any moment, but was apparently a castle. Can Miss Adriana stay for the moon? Emma asked, peering out from under a blanket. The moon? Adriana looked confused. Every night before bed, we look at the moon, Caleb explained, if it's visible. Otherwise, we just look at the sky and talk about where it is. Can she stay, Daddy? Please? Caleb glanced at Adriana. You don't have to. I'd like to, Adriana said. If that's okay. 20 minutes later, the 3 of them stood on the small balcony off the living room. It was barely big enough for one person, but they squeezed together, Emma perched on Caleb's hip, pointing up at the sky. The moon was nearly full, hanging low and bright above the city. There it is, Emma whispered, like speaking too loud might scare it away. It's beautiful, Adriana said softly. Sometimes Daddy tells me stories about the moon, Emma said, like how it's made of cheese. Caleb laughed. I told you that one time as a joke. I liked it. Emma looked at Adriana. Do you know any moon stories? Adriana thought for a moment. When I was little, my mother used to tell me that the moon was a nightlight for people who were afraid of the dark. She said as long as the moon was there, you were never really alone. Emma considered this seriously. I like that story. So do I, Adriana said quietly. They stood there for a while, the 3 of them, watching the moon in comfortable silence. The city hummed below them, distant traffic, voices from other apartments, the rhythm of life continuing all around them. Caleb looked at Adriana. She was staring at the sky, her expression unguarded in a way he'd never seen before. There was something fragile about her in that moment, something real. Eventually, Emma yawned, and Caleb carried her inside to get her ready for bed. Adriana waited in the living room, studying the drawings on the refrigerator. When Caleb emerged from Emma's room 15 minutes later, Adriana was still there, holding the picture Emma had drawn for her at the office. She fell asleep the second her head hit the pillow, Caleb said. She's wonderful. Adriana set the drawing down carefully. You're doing an incredible job with her. I'm doing my best. Some days that's not saying much. It's saying everything. Adriana turned to face him. She's happy, healthy, loved. That's what matters. Caleb gestured to the couch. Do you want to sit for a minute? Or do you need to get going? I can stay? Adriana sat down, tucking one leg under her. If you don't mind. I don't mind. Caleb grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, cheap ones, the only kind he could afford, and handed one to Adriana. She took it without comment. They sat in silence for a moment, the quiet comfortable rather than awkward. Thank you for inviting me, Adriana said finally. This was nice. Nice? Caleb raised an eyebrow. We fed you dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. Exactly. She smiled. I can't remember the last time I did something this normal. Normal is kind of all I've got. Normal is underrated. Adriana took a sip of beer and made a face. Okay, this beer is terrible. Caleb laughed. Yeah, I know. Welcome to my life. I've had worse. I doubt that. Adriana set the beer down. When I was in college, I worked 3 jobs to pay tuition. One of them was at a dive bar on the south side. The owner used to give us free beer at the end of our shifts, but it was always whatever hadn't sold. Warm, flat, sometimes questionable. Caleb stared at her. You worked at a dive bar? For 2 years. She leaned back against the couch. I pulled pints, cleaned up vomit, broke up fights. It was terrible, but it paid. I can't picture you doing that. Nobody can. That's kind of the point. Adriana's expression grew distant. I worked very hard to make sure nobody could see where I came from, to erase every trace of the person I used to be. Why? Because I thought it made me weak. She looked at him. I thought if people knew I'd been poor, desperate, struggling, they wouldn't respect me. They wouldn't take me seriously. Do you still think that? Adriana was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe. Old habits are hard to break. Caleb took a drink of his terrible beer. Can I tell you something? Of course. When I found out about the investigation, when I realized your company was the one that destroyed my life, I wanted to hate you. He met her eyes. I wanted you to be the villain, the cold, heartless billionaire who didn't care about people like me. I wouldn't have blamed you. But you're not. Caleb's voice was soft. You're just a person, trying to do better, trying to fix things. And I think that's harder than being the villain. Adriana's throat worked. Why? Because villains don't have to care. They don't have to feel guilty. They don't have to look at the people they've hurt and try to make it right. Caleb set his beer down. You could have ignored all of this. Let your lawyers handle it, paid people off and moved on. But you didn't. I couldn't. Adriana's voice was barely above a whisper. Not after I met you. Not after I saw what the company did to you. Why does that matter? I'm just one person. You're not just anything. Adriana looked at him, her eyes bright. You're someone who risked everything for his daughter, who filed reports nobody read because it was the right thing to do, who spent weeks helping me fix a mess my company made, even though you had every reason to walk away. I had a daughter to think about. I needed... No. Adriana shook her head. You didn't need to help. You chose to. And that choice reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What? That power isn't about how much money you have or how many people work for you. She smiled sadly. It's about what you do when nobody's watching, when there's no reward, when it costs you something. Caleb felt something shift in the air between them, something that had been building for weeks, maybe longer. I don't know what we're doing here, he said quietly. You and me, whatever this is. Neither do I. I'm not... Caleb gestured around the small apartment. This is my life. I work 3 jobs. I live in a place that's falling apart. I can barely afford to buy Emma new shoes when she outgrows the old ones. I don't fit into your world. I don't fit into my world either. Adriana's voice was raw. I have money and power and success, and I'm alone. I eat dinner by myself every night in an apartment that echoes. I can't remember the last time someone invited me to something that wasn't a business meeting or a board presentation. That's your choice. I know. She looked down at her hands. But I don't want it to be anymore. Caleb's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying, Adriana took a shaky breath. I'm saying that sitting here, drinking terrible beer, and eating dinosaur-shaped nuggets with you and Emma is the happiest I've been in years, and I don't want to lose that. You're not going to lose it. How do you know? Because I don't want to lose it either. They stared at each other. The space between them felt charged, electric. Caleb reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they'd touched since that night in the storm, and it felt like something clicking into place. I don't know how this works, he said. You're a billionaire. You're Caleb. Adriana squeezed his hand. That's all that matters. People are going to talk. They're going to say you're slumming it, that I'm using you for your money. Let them talk. It's not that simple. It is if we decide it is. Adriana's voice was firm. I spent my entire life caring what people thought, building walls, keeping everyone at arm's length, and it made me successful, but it also made me miserable. She moved closer to him on the couch. I don't want to be miserable anymore, Caleb. I want to be happy, and when I'm with you and Emma, I am. Caleb felt his resolve crumbling. This is crazy. Probably, Adriana smiled. But so was driving through a thunderstorm at 100 miles an hour with a stranger's dying daughter in my back seat. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Caleb laughed despite himself. You're insane. Maybe. She leaned her forehead against his. Is that a deal breaker? No, Caleb whispered. No, it's not. He kissed her. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. It was tentative and a little awkward. Two people who'd forgotten how to do this, if they'd ever really known. But it was real. When they pulled apart, Adriana was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her entire face. Okay, Caleb said breathlessly. Okay. Okay? Yeah. Let's do this. Whatever this is. Let's figure it out. Adriana kissed him again, softer this time. Okay. The next few months were harder than either of them expected. The press got wind of their relationship within weeks. Suddenly, Caleb couldn't leave his apartment without cameras in his face. Headlines screamed about the billionaire CEO and the warehouse worker. Think pieces debated whether Adriana was having a midlife crisis or conducting some kind of social experiment. It was brutal. Caleb stopped reading the articles after the fifth one implied he was a gold digger. Adriana hired security to keep the paparazzi away from Emma's daycare. Is it always going to be like this? Caleb asked one night as they sat in Adriana's apartment. She'd finally started inviting him over. Emma was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from running around the massive space like it was an indoor playground. Probably. Adriana poured him a glass of wine that probably cost more than his rent. Does that bother you? Yes. Caleb took the glass, but not enough to walk away. Good. She sat down next to him. Because I'm not letting you walk away. What if Emma gets hurt by all this? The attention, the scrutiny. Then we protect her. Adriana's voice was firm. Whatever it takes. And she meant it. When a tabloid published photos of Emma leaving daycare, Adriana's lawyers descended like avenging angels. The paper issued a retraction and a public apology within 48 hours. When a business rival tried to use Caleb's testimony against Heir Industries as leverage in a negotiation, Adriana shut him down so thoroughly the man retired 6 months later. She was fierce, protective, unyielding when it came to the people she cared about, and Caleb found himself falling deeper in love with her every day. 6 months after that first dinner, Adriana sold her penthouse and bought a house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. It had a yard where Emma could play and a kitchen big enough for all three of them to cook together. You didn't have to do this, Caleb said as they stood in the empty living room, boxes stacked against the walls. I wanted to. Adriana looked around the space. I've lived in penthouses and high-rises my entire adult life. I want something different now. I want a home. Emma ran past them, chasing an imaginary dragon through the empty rooms, her laughter echoing off the walls. "I think we can make that happen," Caleb said softly. The following year, the federal investigation into Heir Industries concluded. Several executives were indicted. Adriana's restructuring of the manufacturing division was held up as a model for corporate accountability. She gave an interview, her first in a decade, where she talked openly about the failures that had led to the investigation and the steps she'd taken to make sure they never happened again. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said to the camera. "I'm asking for a chance to prove that people can change, that companies can change, that we can do better." The interview went viral. Some people believed her, some didn't. But Caleb watched it from their living room now, officially, the paperwork finalized just last week, and felt a surge of pride so intense it almost knocked him over. "You did good," he said when she got home that night. Adriana collapsed onto the couch next to him, exhausted. "I was terrified." "You didn't look terrified. You looked strong." "I was faking it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Where's Emma?" "Asleep. She made you a picture. It's on the fridge." Adriana smiled. "What's this one?" "I think it's us at the park, although it might be 3 very tall flowers. It's hard to tell." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the house quiet around them. "I've been thinking," Adriana said eventually. "About what?" "About the future." She sat up and looked at him. "About what we're building here." Caleb's heart started to race. And I want more of it." Adriana took his hand. "I want mornings where Emma barges into our room at 6 a.m. demanding pancakes. I want dinner conversations about dinosaurs and the moon. I want to come home to someone who actually cares that I'm home." "You have that, I know." She squeezed his hand. "But I want it to be official, legal, permanent." Caleb stared at her. Are you asking me to marry you?" "I think I am." Adriana looked nervous for the first time in months. "I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I love you, Caleb, and I love Emma, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. "You're sure? Because once you're in, you're in. Emma's going to want you at every dance recital and parent-teacher conference. I'm going to drive you crazy with my terrible taste in beer. We're going to fight about whose turn it is to do the dishes." "I'm counting on it," Adriana smiled. "So what do you say?" Caleb kissed her, long and deep and full of every emotion he didn't have words for. "Yes," he said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, absolutely yes." Adriana laughed, pulling him close. "We're going to be good at this. We're going to be terrible at this sometimes." "Probably," she grinned, "but we'll figure it out together." They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the house. Just family, what little they had, and a few close friends. Emma was the flower girl and took her job so seriously she refused to smile for any of the photos. The media tried to turn it into a circus, but Adriana's security team kept them at bay. It was private, intimate, theirs. During the vows, Caleb looked at Adriana and saw not the CEO or the billionaire or the woman who'd saved his daughter's life. He saw his partner, his equal, the person who'd chosen to stand beside him even when it would have been easier to walk away. "I promise," he said, his voice steady, "to love you on the good days and the bad ones, to challenge you when you need it and support you always, to build a life with you that's messy and real and ours." Adriana's eyes shimmered with tears. "I promise to let you in, even when it's scary, to choose us over everything else, to be the person Emma calls when she needs help with her homework at midnight because I still won't understand fractions." Everyone laughed. When they kissed, Emma cheered so loudly the neighbors probably heard. 2 years later, Adriana stepped down as CEO of Heir Industries. She stayed on the board, but she handed day-to-day operations to someone else. "I don't want to miss any more of Emma's childhood," she told Caleb, "and I don't want to miss ours either." She started a foundation instead, focused on workplace safety and supporting families affected by industrial accidents. It was smaller, more personal, more meaningful. Caleb kept his job at Davidson Logistics. He liked the work, liked the people, but he cut back to 1 shift. They didn't need the money anymore, but he needed the routine, the normalcy. Emma thrived. She made friends at her new school, joined the soccer team despite being terrible at it, started asking questions about science and space that neither Caleb nor Adriana could answer, so they learned together. On Emma's 7th birthday, she stood in the backyard of their house, surrounded by friends and family, and blew out the candles on her cake. "What did you wish for?" Caleb asked, as Adriana cut slices. Emma grinned, gap-toothed and happy. "I can't tell you. It won't come true." "That's the rule," Adriana agreed solemnly. But later that night, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep, she came into their bedroom and climbed between them. "I wish that we could be together forever," she whispered. "All three of us." Caleb felt his throat tighten. He looked at Adriana, saw his own emotion reflected back at him. "That's a good wish, baby," he said softly. "The best wish," Adriana added, wrapping an arm around Emma. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, safe and warm and whole. Years later, when Emma asked them to tell her the story of how they met, Caleb and Adriana took turns filling in the details. The storm, the hospital, the check, the revelation, all of it. "So you saved me?" Emma said when they finished. "We saved each other," Adriana corrected gently, "all three of us." And that was the truth of it. Caleb had spent years drowning, convinced he had to do everything alone. Adriana had spent years building walls, convinced she had to be invincible. But somehow, on a rain-soaked night when everything was falling apart, they'd found each other. And they'd learned that strength wasn't about never needing help. It was about accepting it when it was offered, about giving it freely when someone needed it, about building something together that was bigger than either of you could create alone. It wasn't perfect. They still fought about dishes and money and whose turn it was to pick Emma up from practice. There were hard days and difficult conversations and moments when the past tried to drag them backward, but they faced it together. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, about choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. It was about a man who drove through a storm to save his daughter, and a woman who followed him because she remembered what it was like to feel powerless, and a little girl who reminded them both what home really meant. It was about three broken pieces that somehow fit together perfectly. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.